Reflection on priorities, on what's important and what's not, on what is necessity and what is just desire, on what is right and what is wrong. Hanukkah was that battle, a battle between the spiritual and the material. The spiritual, like the Torah, built on the rocks and the will of Hashem, against the material, a life built only on the personal will. Living the eternal or living the past. The battle continues throughout the generations and to this day. Sometimes in the past year or so, we get a reminder that the material is just passing, as we see years of work and effort to attain the great advantage from the blink of an eye, while the spiritual continues to strong together. Tonight we come here once again, not only to remember, but also to reflect. To reflect on the life of one who stood on the winning side of this battle, one who set Torah and Hashem's will as the basis of life, one who put his family before every material endeavor, and who valued the happiness of himself and those around him above everything else to make it fine. I now call on Mr. Danny Klein to give us first-hand insight into the life and legacy of Mickey Klein.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My honored family and friends, we gathered here again tonight, the 24th of Tuesday, to commemorate Mickey's Yahrtzeit, the third one, which will actually fall tomorrow night on the first night of Hanukkah. I've often wondered in the last 3 years why Mickey departed from this world on Hanukkah, our festival of lights, to leave us behind in a darker place because of his loss. And the only answer, the consolation of sorts that I came up with was that if we are told this world is a glimpse of the world to come, it must be that he was needed to make the next world a brighter place. For never a day passes that I don't meet a friend, neighbour, relative, or acquaintance who recalls and misses his warm smile, his kind word, his jokes, and his helping hand. I've been a quandary as to whether to continue this series of Yahrtzeit, feeling that perhaps I was milking our story or situation dry and burdening all of you with yet another one of these events. However, when I decided a couple of months ago to go ahead with it, I encountered something interesting. Whereas I had thought that my children would be very positive about the event I was organising, JJ, my Bahar, approached me and asked me why was I arranging this evening. I've been thinking over the last few weeks about the answer to this question, and with your permission, I'll delve into the reasoning. True Urubu is the first mitzvah that we are given in the Torah, and so we get married and bring children into this world. But why? We are told in order to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. Our faith of thousands of years has withstood the test of time, and only because Hashem's will and our ingrained tradition to pass on to the next generation our God-given commandments, and religion is the reason. Ask any young Jewish boy learning Pirkei Avos, and he'll tell you, Moshe Kibbutz Torah Sinai, Umasar Yehoshua. Yeshua les Canaan, וזקנים לא נביאים, נביאים מסרוה לאנשי כנסת הגדולה. Whereas the Jewish woman continues our lineage through her child, we entrust our Yahrtzeit into our children's hands and in turn into their children's hands in order for us to survive. And so I decided to dedicate this evening another event in Mickey's memory in order to entrust his legacy to our children and to relive that legacy with all of you who recall Mickey so well and so often. What is Mickey's legacy? Well, firstly, to always be the simcha, and he wasn't even Hasidish. Wear a smile on your face and the whole world will smile with you. We have a choice in every situation to see the positive or the negative. Acknowledge the Kodesh Baruch Hu in everything, whether good or bad, and realize that it's all a part of the big plan that's waiting to unfold. Speak pleasantly, whether in tone or content. Be slow to anger, and even when you feel the need to rebuke, do it with love. Start your day with enthusiasm and watch it blossom. Know from whence you came and where you are going, and enjoy the ride. These qualities, amongst others, are Mickey's legacy. It was so important for me to be able to instill these qualities in my children, especially over this past year when we have gone through very difficult times, that I felt the need to both boost my attitude and decided to attend a positive thinking course, which the obvious Hashgacha project just fell into my lap and took place right here in Yahrtzeit. The teacher taught us how to dig and find and see the positive in any situation, and above all, to remember that I'm doing the very best that I can. Mickey grew up in Melbourne, Australia. He attended the Lubavitch School, Yeshiva College there. It was ingrained in him to live the simcha, even at times when his life was far from sameach. He was taught there how to love our Yiddishkeit and to love our fellow man. Often he would tell us of the hookups to the Rebbe's Verbrennen that they enjoyed so often. He would even do a takeoff of the Rebbe quoting him with the whole Torah Chayam Adam Yiris Atzvai Ki'ilu Yatzah Mitzrayim. The famous quote from the Haggadah of Pesach that we read at the Seder table. Again, the whole reason being for the benefit of our children. Mickey's whole approach to Yiddishkeit, whether his insistence of being at minyan early, not just on time, davening at the almost, reciting each word clearly and succinctly, singing with all the love and kavanah of his ancestors, the Kohanim, the beautiful nigunim of our tefillos and tmiras, or the laying of the parsha, teaching the boys with such love and enthusiasm the holy words of our Torah. He was a positive experience which was inculcated by his Lubavitch education and his grandfather in Sydney, Rabbi Ernest Wolf, Alav Shalom, Reverend of Central Synagogue for 65 years, whom Mickey greatly admired. Just recently, Chabad has resurfaced in the Jewish world with the tragic deaths of Rabbi Gabriel and Rivka Holster and their guests at the Chabad house in Mumbai. Many articles have circulated about the amazing qualities of the Holzberg couple and the great lengths they went to in order to make everyone who passed through Mumbai Chabad house so welcome. What real tzaddikim they were, and that in response to their death, Chabad will fight back with the battle of love to show the world what V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha really means. The Kol Koreh went out that if 10 wicked terrorists can wreak such havoc, how much good can 10,000 Yidden do when they take upon themselves to perform one mitzvah each? Le'ilui the neshamas of the Kedoshim who died al Kiddush Hashem. The websites were flooded by pledges from Yidden across the globe whose new thought, their spark, had been kindled, and who wished to use the cry, battle cry, and do a mitzvah, le'ilui the neshamas. A group of the Holzberg's friends put together a documentary about their lives from childhood until their death, which was circulated on the internet. I was fortunate to have watched it. Rav Gabriel met the Lubavitch Rebbe at a young age and received a bracha from him. Even then, he was destined for greatness. Rivki traveled during her summer vacations to outlying areas in Russia to assist and bring Yiddishkeit to our brothers, wherever they may be. It was the Rebbe's will that the shluchim be sent all over the world Ufarasta Yama Vakegma Safoina Vanekma. And he explained that Vahata Lorecha Kamocha doesn't refer only to your neighbor and friend that you know, but also to your brother on the other side of the world, who may be less fortunate than you and whom you don't even know. That is these Shlokin's calling, to return these brothers to the truth. The Rebbe was quoted in a sikha to his Talmudim after a tragic death of a young mother who left very young orphans behind. How the children's tar would continue throughout their lives, and how they would relate to their children their mother's wonderful qualities. The Rebbe continued by saying that the question, why did this happen, is not ours to ask, because only Hashem can answer that. However, it is our right to ask, Ad Matai, until when? Until when will we suffer this solace? How many more of our brilliant, innocent, holy young will be cut down in their prime? Until when will our people suffer with sickness and pain? We live in very uncertain times. Norms and values have been tossed to the wind. Violence erupts everywhere, and terrorism is the new order of the day. The way to get things done and to get your voice heard. The madness and the nuclear threat of Iran, faced with insipid world leaders who dare not speak out or take any action, who are seriously considering action for the day after rather than prevention, because the evil has been permitted to fester for too long. The world seems as if it is spinning in the wrong direction, or has fallen off its axle. It is in these very times that we must instill in our children our holy and matchless values in order for them and subsequently us to survive. We must give them the tools to withstand the insanity of the world at large and the skills to put things back into perspective. The Holzbergs gained the respect of Jews and non-Jews alike. They were the epitome of Orla Goyim. Nicky did not differentiate between people. He looked for the good in everyone, Jew and non-Jew alike. People are saying all over the world that we are in the Iklas de Meshicha. Will I say, come on down, Bimhera B'Yameinu. We so need the Yeshua and the Geula Shalema. May we be like at this time, Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, to emerge from the darkness into the light, to rekindle the faith as the Maccabim did in the days of old, and to have the opportunity to return to Har HaMoriah and to rededicate the Beit HaMikdash to its former holiness and glory. I would like to take this opportunity to thank a few very important people without whom this evening would not have evolved. Firstly, to Rabbi Dr. Nathan Lopez Cardozo, our loyal friend and mentor who switched his schedule in order to address us here tonight, who is available for guidance anytime and who still comes to visit every Friday, bearing flowers and candy, sits, listens, and offers vital advice no matter what the time. May you and your family be blessed, Bachol. To Rabbi Dr. Joshua Mark, I don't know where he is at the moment. Hi. Our champion and our guru, who can be reached at any time with any problem and will go out of his way by miles to assist, and you will have the privilege of hearing a little bit later. To a specific cousin who doesn't wish to have his name mentioned, and a friend of the family, who keeps similar nocturnal hours to mine, and without whom the DVD, which is available here tonight, would not have come to fruition. Thank you for working very long hours on very short deadlines, and for sharing your vital technical knowledge and Hungarian humor. To Dr. Maury Banks and Dr. Les Glassman, for their devoted friendship and funding under the auspices of Hod, the Hebrew Order of David. Yashar Kofachem. To all our loyal friends who have made us a part of their family, are happy to assist with anything and everything and never forget us. To my family, who are always there for us. And to all the friends who arranged and made the cakes available here tonight. Lastly and most importantly, I give thanks to our Kodesh Baruch Hu for the loan of his child Mickey and for the gift of our children. May the learning here tonight be as an Ilui Neshama for Mickey and all of our brothers and sisters whom we await to be reunited with at Tchias HaMesim, and for a refuah shalema to all the Chalim of Klal Yisrael. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, inspiring insight. That's where I could help you with this rescheduled program in Iran to be able to say, give a share of your rituals.
Shavua Tov to everybody. First of all, my thanks to Daniela for inviting me again to speak at this very special occasion, thinking about our great friend. Daniela, you have expressed, like always, deep feeling. Whenever we speak on Friday, I hear that coming from your Neshama. And to speak personally, my family and all the friends, a lot of courage to continue. Because we know you are to battle every time again. You're trying to use sometimes at which there is no end point, but I promise you something. I'm not a Nabi, I'm not a great man, but I promise you that sooner than later. Friends, I want tonight to speak with you about the deep struggle I know that also Mickey somehow was involved in, because he often used to speak about it. Mickey was a very deep religious person. He was a Yahrtzeit. He was a Kohen, a priest. And we often spoke about what does that mean? Number one, what does it mean to be religious? Number two, how can one be a Yahrtzeit far from Jesus? And how do you live up to this incredible privilege to be a Kohen, to be a priest? All of these matters are related to one issue: inspiration, to be inspired. Chazanut, I once wrote, is somewhere a fight against the secularization of the world. It is a fight against spiritual indifference. At the same time, to be a Chazan is also to be a Mefaresh, to be somebody who explains the prayers while they take place. The way how you think, how you say the words, even how you move your body. All these matters are matters which play a tremendous role when one tries to get a community coming with you to encounter God's word. The task of people like that, Kohanim, Yahrtzeit, to be religious is indeed to somehow not just elevate, but above all to draw out of a person his deep religious experience. Klapei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do you live in the presence of God? This is an enormous question. How can we live up to this challenge? And I don't have to tell you that today the Jewish community around the world, here in Israel, in America, and so many other places, we are being challenged left and right. There are scandals which take place in our communities, like the one now taking place in America, a Chilul Hashem don't imagination. There are smaller Chilulei Hashem, and as Daniela just mentioned, there are tremendous forms of Hashem, like what happened far away from us in the Far East only 2 weeks ago. All these matters must make us to start thinking who we are, what we should stand for, And what is the fight all about? Because it's a fight. It's war. It is not a physical war. It is a war, first of all, on our spiritual level. A war where we, as most of us are, at least we claim, including myself, that somehow we live a religious life, that indeed we are genuine religious. And I believe that this is a very big problem. What is it that makes a person religious? Many of us go to shul every morning, every afternoon, every evening. We observe Shabbat, we eat kosher, we keep Taharat and Mishpacha, family purity. But does that mean that we are religious? Does this mean that we understand what it means to live in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It obviously is an unbelievable undertaking, if at all possible, to be aware that you live in the presence of the King, which requires royalty on our side. I don't know about you, but I often walk out of school when I feel that I failed, purely because the way as I walked into school is exactly the same way as I walked out of school. Nothing happened. I was not transformed. There are maybe many different reasons, maybe personal reasons. It may be reasons which have to do with the school. It may have something to do with the housing. There are also the issues at work, and we sometimes don't know even what they are because they are very often on a level which are not really conscious. But there's one thing which I want to speak about tonight because I know it is close to his heart. And these are not easy words which I'm going to say, and I hope you understand. But what I'm going to say is, A, because I know that Nicky would have agreed with me. Number two, because I believe that honesty and integrity is here at stake at this moment. I'm a doctor of philosophy, and I read a lot of secular works besides being for many years involved in Yeshiva learning. And I still read a lot of secular works. Today, that's part of one of the things which I have to do in the teaching. Sometimes I'm terribly disturbed what that means. And also times I'm very deeply impressed. Not only by what Jews write, but also what non-Jews write. Because sometimes they write the right things. And sometimes we can learn from them tremendously, and we're not always aware of it. Because sometimes our attitude as fluid, as we call our attitude, is that anything which comes from that world, by the definition, must be wrong. But that's far from true. There are many people out there with tremendous integrity. There is a professor of philosophy by the name of Walter Percy. You probably have never heard of him in America. Who wrote a book about education. It is called The Loss of the Creature. A very remarkable book. And he discusses there something, and he obviously does not discuss that at all in relationship to Yahrtzeit, to Yahrtzeit, but to education, real education. And it has a lot to do with us. He gives the following example, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to get to. He compares two young people who are, under very different circumstances, somehow pulled to discover something. One is walking on the seashore and sees a little fish, a dead fish lying in front of him. He takes it home and he takes the fish apart because he wants to know how it looks inside, the anatomy of that fish. But he does that in his own way. He takes his own knives, his own instruments. He doesn't keep to any rules at all. He just wants to see how does this little creature look inside. And he discovers many unusual things there. And then there is another student. He is, in this story, a student of Harvard University in America, who gets this particular fish on his desk in front of him, like all the other students. And next to it are also instruments how to take the fish apart. And accepting also structures, instructions how to do so. First you do this, then you do that, then you take this part away, then you move to that particular part. On the end, this student also gets an impression of how that fish looks. But then the remarkable thing, and anybody who knows about education knows how true that is. Both these young people actually saw something totally different. They didn't see the same fish. One was instructed to take it apart in a certain way, and was in fact instructed how to see that fish. The other one didn't have any such instructions beforehand. He went his own way. It was spontaneous. And therefore he saw many things which the other one did not see. As much as it is possibly true that what he did not see was seen by the Harvard student. There is something which philosophers have called prepared experience. Prepared experience. What that means is that there are many cases where we are told beforehand how to experience it. We are brought into a particular picture, and that happens in the case of the Harvard student. He walks into that particular picture. He needs to see this because that's what it says. And therefore it is all prepared. He actually doesn't discover anything new, because his professors have already seen it themselves. And many other students will see the same thing. It's the same color, it's the same music. But the fellow who walked around on the seashore and took it apart his own way, he may no doubt have lost, but it was done in a spontaneous way. There was no such thing as a prepared experience. It somehow stood in front of him. It may have overwhelmed him at the moment. There was a tremendous amount of personal, let's say, introduction to a world, a personal experience, which the Harvard student would never have. This is the problem. This does not only exist in general education throughout the world. And this, by the way, is the reason why very often, even the academic world today, and there's a lot of great stuff going on in the academic world at the same time, it doesn't always produce very great people, because they're already being told what they have to discover. And that's a terrible tragedy. But the fellow who walks around in the middle of nowhere land, or wants to understand something on his own, often indeed will see things which others don't see. Nobel Prize winners are the few exceptions to the rule, I would say, where somebody who is in Harvard is able to look outside the box. Because all of us, one way or the other, we are in that box. That's our education. That's the way how we have been educated at home, in our communities, in our schools, and we pay a heavy price. And that problem, my dear friends, is a problem which we also have. Prepared experience. Because it is very often the way how we deal with our own personal halachic. We have Baruch Hashem Shulchan Aruch, where the Codex of Jewish law, it tells us exactly how to do things. But we have to realize one thing, that while we need that guidance, it often means that our personal experience in all this gets missed somewhere. We are so busy keeping all the laws of the Mishneh Berurah, and I will be the last one to deny the incredible importance of it, that sometimes we don't hear anymore the music behind it. May I say, the chazan behind it, the colors behind it. We no longer see the larger picture of what this is all about, why we live this life, and how that life should really bring us closer to our HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That we experience it more than what we normally do, and that we walk out of shul indeed feeling transformed, being different from the moment that we walked into that shul. How do you live in the presence of God's word? What does it mean to be authentically religious? Now, I can speak about that for hours. And I'm only going to give you one little insight into this, because I think that this is a spirit of meeting, and I hope that we all learn a little bit from it, and if you do not learn from it, I will. I once said to my students the following. The problem with halachic living is that sometimes it is so incredibly complicated, and we have to know so much that indeed because of that reason we no longer have the time to spend on what it should do to our understanding. That I once coined the following phrase, and forgive me, it sounds funny, but it's really very, very serious. Judaism, Yahrtzeit, is the art of finding a problem for every solution. Of finding a problem for every solution. Have a look around in our tradition. We make out of everything an issue. The smallest matter. If it is on Shabbat how to make coffee, if it are very little details, which I can tell you for sure, no other religion would ever go into these kinds of details. No other religion will even understand what it is all about, and we discussed the question if a heart of a youth in a Sefer Torah is still there, yes or no, by which that Sefer Torah becomes pasul. Go and explain this to the world. That if a little bit of ink fell off, you can no longer use the Sefer Torah because it is pasul. And everybody will ask us, why? What is that so important about it? You still know the story. You still know there's a youth there. You can continue to read it. And we say, no, the details is of tremendous importance to us. And then, when we are asked about that, what the meaning behind it is, many of us do not know the answer. There was a very famous Jewish philosopher in America who belonged to the conservative movement. Although he lived himself a religious life, and there are great things to learn from him, and there are also things where we have to disagree. His name was Abraham Joshua Heschel. He was a grandson of one of the great rabbis. And he once said the following important word. He says, it sounds a little non-Jewish, but it is so true. Judaism is the theology of the trivialities of life. And that's so true. Trivialities in the sense that every little trivial matter by us becomes a holy issue. Because this world is really made out of one thing only. Holy triviality. What belongs or belongs to another person to be completely trivial. Can you open a fridge on Shabbat, yes or no? Is the youth there or is he not there in the Sefer Torah? All the other little things, indeed, they are seemingly trivialities. But they make up your and my life. Because these are moments, and we have to realize that very well, that every second which we live in this world, we actually live this in the presence of God. That is to say that every second of our lives needs to be sanctified, because this second is the only second you have. A moment later is another moment, and that second before is the only time you got that second. There is no such thing as saying, I will think later. Because later is not the same time. It is another moment in your life. And therefore it is crucial that at that moment we need to sanctify that issue. So therefore we do go into trivialities. Because we realize that trivialities need to be sanctified. Because that's what life is all about. Most of us don't live political lives where the whole community or the whole world is busy with us. We are mainly busy with small little matters. But they take place in the presence of God. So they can't be insignificant. They only can be tremendously significant. Because anything what takes place in front of our first world, by definition, is significant. As much as we ourselves are significant in his eyes. But it requires something. And we are fighting this in our community, in my personal and humble opinion. The question about getting used to all of it. Doing it automatically. As all the rabbis have so often warned us for this, that we should not do it automatically. That we should every time again have a different experience. We sometimes make the mistake of saying that it is scientific knowledge which is undermining religion. Or that it is just the Yahrtzeit, as we call it, or secular philosophy, or because people want to live in comfortable life. But we have to realize that it really goes much deeper than that. The problem is also that somehow we were not able to send the message to ourselves and to our children that we have made matters irrelevant, dull, perhaps obsessive and oppressive, purely because if you don't hear the truth anymore, and you're only reading the notes, then you cannot understand what really goes on and what the real meaning behind all this is. Now there's one thing which I want to, this night, to focus on. As I told you before a few times already, I used to learn, actually not for a very long time, but we used to learn, Mickey and I, every morning for an hour in the morning. And the interesting thing, obviously, about Gemara is that Gemara is one enormous debate. Most of the time, these debates were never settled. They were settled by later authorities, because at a certain moment you need to know if it is A or B. But in the Gemara, most of the time, we do not know exactly what the final conclusion should be. That's very interesting. I myself come from a secular background, as many of you as well. An interesting thing is that when you walk into this world of learning, of Jewish learning, which is so incredibly different from any other learning in university. Already the fact alone that the discussion, the vikuach, the constant debate which goes on in a yeshiva, walk into a yeshiva and you think for a moment, how can it be that here people are learning because the noise is enormous. Everybody is shouting to each other. I remember when I walked for the first time into this after university, you can't believe your eyes, you can't believe your ears. But then you realize it's tremendous thing. It is exactly because of this liturgy, because of these enormous discussions, of these fights, that Yiddishkeit stayed alive. It gave it its power, it gave it enormous vitality. And I think that this is one of the best reasons why we are still around. You know why? Because we are a fighting people. We don't fight about things which perhaps a good part of the rest of the world is fighting about. We fight about what did Hashem say at Sinai. What is it that he wants from us? And then suddenly we are confronted with a marvelous thing, which I don't think we, in the yeshiva world, fully understand and appreciate. What we encounter is unbelievable diversity, where there are so many different opinions, stated by the greatest minds and the greatest hearts of the time, from Idei Chachamim, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, Abaye, Rabbah, all these incredible people who kept on discussing matters. And when you walk from outside into this, and you look to this, and you don't really get a final answer to the questions that are being discussed, you wonder, my highest is in Aramaic. What is the meaning behind that? Why do we learn like that? Why do we fight about the Pasuk? Or we fight about the Sugya in the Gemara, and we can write Pirushim on that till the end of this. There is a British philosopher, a non-Jew, very famous, by the name of Alistair MacIntyre. Very famous man for those people who live in that world. He wrote a book, a remarkable book, which is called After Virtue. And there he discusses the important things he doesn't realize that he's discussing us. Because he doesn't know anything about the Jewish world. But when I read this for the first time, and I discussed this afterwards with the chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Professor Sachs, we suddenly realized what an incredible thing this man was saying about us. And you know, it's an interesting thing in this world which we sometimes forget. Sometimes people only discover the beauty of Yiddishkeit when an outsider tells us how great it is. When the non-Jew tells us it is great, it must be great. If the rabbis tell us that, we are not so sure. Let me read you what he writes about tradition. And I hope you hear well, I'll try to explain it. When a tradition, he writes, is in a good order, it always partially constitutes an argument. A tradition is made out of argument about the goods which this tradition has to deliver. So when an institution, he gives the following example, a university, or a farm where people are farmers, or a hospital, are to bear a tradition, are the bearers of a tradition, of a particular way of dealing with patients, a particular way of discussing or educating their students, its common life will be partly, but in an essentially important way, constituted by a continuous argument as to what a university should be and ought to be, and what good farming is all about, and what it ought to be. The tradition, he writes, is vital because it is the only way that university will stay a good university. When the discussion will go on about what makes this university a good university. The moment we come and agree on it, that's the end of the institution. That's the end of a good business. That's the end of anything what man does, because it must embody an argument. The argument goes on, the university gets better results. The argument comes to an end because we solve all the problems, and the university will come down, and we have seen this many times happening in the academic world. That's a remarkable observation. Because what this professor of philosophy is telling us is, we normally think, and I hope you hear well what I'm saying, is that an argument is a way to, that is to say, that the tradition will be the end of the argument. Once we have argued it out all, and we come to a final conclusion, then we have a tradition. And McIntyre is telling us, and that's typically Jewish, he says that's not true at all. Argument is the tradition. It is not the end of the tradition. It is not what ultimately has to totzah, but it is the continuation of argument which is the tradition itself. And strangely enough, I don't know why, and perhaps by now he already does know, he was describing us. Because we have a tradition which tells us not to agree. Oh yes, at the end of the day, we need to know if the halakha is like Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel. Absolutely true. But let me remind you of a very strange and interesting and marvelous statement made in the Gemara in Yahrtzeit. When the Gemara tells us that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, who are the two greatest schools that are constantly in dispute about anything, when on the end there was the question, so in according to who is the halakha, Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel? Then we are being told that Beit Hillel is mainly, like on Hanukkah as well, we follow their instructions. Ask the Gemara, why? For what reason are we following Beit Hillel over Beit Shammai?